Sup nerds, I'm Tom. We're going to talk about the new edition of Carpe Diem, even though I believe the first edition only came out like 2 years ago, or not even, maybe? I don't know. Time's weird. So like I just said, this is a new reprint edition. So this Aaliyah line was started back, way back when. They're numbering the boxes on the side. And Carpe Diem was, I think, the last of the old numbers, and then they restarted it with a new printing of Las Vegas and then Castles of Burgundy. And this one is actually Castles of Tuscany was number 3. This one is number 5. It's a little weird that this one came out before number 4, but whatever. So I do already have a review for the first edition, so I'm not going to talk too much. Well, I guess I'll go over it again briefly, just in case you haven't seen that video. But I do want to talk about, the changes that they've made, which are mostly graphical and were extremely necessary from the old edition. So this is a very point salad game by Stefan Feld. Actually, when I was showing this to my friends just yesterday, one of them said, "Oh, this feels a lot like that Burgundy game." And I said, "Yeah, it's the same guy." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." You're going to draft tiles and place them on your board, starting in a certain spot and then spreading out from there, and just trying to score points in different ways. Tons of different types of buildings that link together. Like there'll be halves of buildings, right? And when you put them next to each other, that completes the building and you get a special ability. Some of the buildings are just straight up you place it and you get something. Usually that's not as good. And some of them there's like ends and middles, so you can build it a little bit bigger to try and get a better thing. Most of those have to do with you get resources, which is something you'll spend on scoring cards. You can, some of them just straight up are points. Some of them will let you get coins or bread, which are extra resource things that I'll talk about in a second. You can also get extra scoring cards, or you could advance up this track up here, which is both something that you can do when you complete a certain building, but there are also little tiny tokens all over your board, and whenever you cover one up with a new tile, that'll let you advance up on this track as well. This is both turn order, only for choosing the cards. So it's turn order for choosing the scoring cards at the end of every round, but it's also points. So that was my one friend's complaint, was he was like, "I think this is almost incentivizing you a little bit too much to do it because it is points and it's turn and you get to choose the scoring cards first, so it's almost too strong." I disagree, and I'll get to that in a second. But again, just doing the briefest of overviews so you at least have an idea. Again, this is not a how to play. Go watch Rodney Smith for that. He's hella dope. You'll know this game like the back of your hand after watching that video. You will draft these tiles by moving a piece from a little clump. So these tiles are in clumps of 4. You go either to the left or to the right clump, and you choose a tile from there. If the section is empty, you kind of skip it. So I'm going to move to the right, which that section is empty. So I'll bounce over it and go to the right again and get a tile from there. And then you place it on your board or whatever. After we move around in here and we clear off the board, then we go to scoring things, where in turn order, based on this track here, you get to place one of your tokens in between 2 scoring cards, and you get the option to do both. Some of the cards require you to spend resources or spend things. Others just require you to have that thing. If you just need to have it, the reward is a lot less. It will give you more resources and other things to build your engine, versus the spending is usually points. And now this scoring card section is actually where I tend to disagree with what my buddy's assessment. Now, of course, he had only played it just the once, and it just so happened that the flop of cards that we put out happened to all be really expensive. Now, there's a way you do the distribution of them, so it's generally not supposed to happen. I think we just happened to get, the nut draw, or the opposite of the nut draw, or whatever you call it. Where a lot of the cards were really expensive, so we were losing points a lot. You always have to put a token in between 2 cards, and if you cannot complete one of them, you lose 4 points. If you can't complete either of them, you lose 8 points. But you have to put a token down there, so you can get really screwed over if all the cards are really high value. So I think in that particular instance, being the first one to choose, being ahead on this track, so you were the first one to choose the scoring cards, was really valuable then, because a lot of the scoring cards are worth a lot of points, and there may only be one spot you can put your token where you'll be able to actually score points and not lose points. So that's a big deal. In other games, that tends not to be the thing. These are more well distributed and a little bit lower points, so this isn't the main way to get points. And the game should really feel like a point salad game. We can get points in tons of different ways, because also where you place on your board can get you points too by these little things that you put around the thing, right? It said, hey, if there's a red building here, you get points. If there's a brown building here, you get points. So you want to arrange it in such a way that you can score these and get them together and get your engine going and meet these requirements and move up really high on here. Now that I'm done, yammering about the how you play the game, I will talk about this new edition is mostly graphical, mostly changing the component, not the quality per se, but like for example, and this was the biggest problem with the original game, was there are two different types of tiles. There's the type that are out here that you draft, and then there are extra tiles down here that are pretty much all ends, right? Which you may need. If I'm building this big red building, I really need an end so I can close this thing off so I can score it. So those are down here. There's some ways that you can get them. There's some special buildings that will let you take an extra tile. These also get dealt out in the last round, so that everybody can close off their buildings. But these are black and these are white. In the original version of the game, they were both green. They were both like a different shade of green that was not far off enough. And I was like, what? Why? Why was that a choice at all? Whose idea was that? Also, a lot of the buildings. Now, I didn't really find that too much of a problem, but I had a friend who is partially colorblind, and he was having issue like delineating between different buildings. And I think they made the colors in here a lot brighter. Like just in general, I hate when games are really drab, like thematically, and pastel colors and just look really bland. I know a lot of older Euros used to look that way a lot. I kind of got used to it a little bit, and most Euros are tending to go away from that, which is good. But those are always just, I was always like, why? Why are those the choices, Like it never computes, especially because of problems like that. Like when things are really drab and pastel and aren't poppy and colorful, you can have issues of not being able to tell between different things. And speaking of being able to tell, there's coins is a resource, right? But really they're just a wild of the other resources. The resources are grapes, fish, leaves, and chickens, and they're made out of wood. And then you can get coins, which is a wild resource. But why? Why is this a coin and not just a wild resource token? Why isn't it like a circle with all the colors on it, or like it says wild, or there's like the pictures of all the stuff? You know what I mean? That's just a weird choice that I notice Stefan Feld kind of does in his games. Like the other one, Castles of Tuscany, which was number 3 in this line, that one it was a card-based game, right? You set collected cards. You should actually check out our thoughts on the game up on our YouTube channel also. But you set collected cards in your hands, and then there was something you could do that would let you get a worker, which was a wooden token, and it is represented a wild card. Well, why wasn't that just a wild card? You know what I mean? Like, why is that it? The mixing of this, like a wooden piece meant to represent a card or a cardboard token meant to represent a wooden piece, is another just kind of odd choice. Like, I get it. It's not. I'm not confused, but just why? The other really big change with this edition, and it's the only thing that I really noticed mechanically. I mean, they might have cleaned up some other things somewhere else, but the biggest mechanical difference I've noticed is I said that when you choose the pool of tiles you go to, you're at a certain section and you either go to the left or to the right? Well, in the OG edition, there were these lines across the board that said you either bounce across the circle to this one or bounce across the circle to that one, right? And it's essentially the same thing. At any one section you're at, you have a choice of 2 other sections, right? And I do think that actually this was implemented in another type of reprint, like the second printing of the old edition or something. Before this, like I had the original printing, and I know that they tried to fix some of these issues with that original edition, and then decided, well, we're just going to reprint it again, which leads me to believe, well, how many copies of this game are they selling if they keep pumping out new editions? But this is the only thing that I don't know if I really agree with. Like, granted, it is the same thing, but it almost felt like cooler to jump across the aisle because, like, again, if something is empty, right? You just bounce off of that. So it almost felt like a more strategic and, interesting, cool decision to say, well, I could go to this one across here, which is empty, or I could go to this one over here, which is full. I am going to choose to go to this one, which is empty, which means I bounce out and go over to this one over here, which is also empty, which means I bounce out and get to this one. Haha! You didn't think I could get all the way over to there, did you? Now, I do still have my old edition, and I'm kind of tempted to maybe add that board into here. Granted, I probably should just give the old edition away, right, to somebody else. Maybe I'll swap out the boards. I don't know. There's a part of me that wants to just throw out the old edition. Actually, my box is pretty beat up, which actually is my main complaint about this game. We keep talking about component quality and stuff, and I said the component, like the the colors and stuff were fixed here. The component quality is still garbage. Wooden pieces are good. The tiles are okay. Cards are quite thin, and the box. This whole series is always printed on the thinnest boxes possible they could get. Well, there's maybe one level thinner they could have gone, but still so thin that every single copy of a game I have this whole line thus far, and some of the older line too, every single copy gets dinged up in shipping. And every game I get is shipped to me in one way or the other. Even if I buy it at the local game store, it gets shipped there, and it always gets dinged up in shipping, like every time without fail. So I'm just so sick of it by now. Now again, you might be sick of hearing me talk about it, but I'm not going to stop because they haven't changed yet. But there's a small part of me that thinks I want to take that board from my old edition and add it to this edition, so I have two versions of the board. So if it really seems like it's going to be a problem for somebody, I can use this board. But I don't feel like I have any more I can say about the game. I think it's great. I think it feels very Stefan Feldy. So if you have a lot of Stefan Feld, well, then that means you probably will like this one. But then again, it probably won't feel all that different from the other games. So you'll have to make that decision yourself. But I do really recommend it. It's one of the better Felds, I think, because it's pretty light. Like I really liked games like Forum Trajanum and Trajan, but this one is a bit more accessible. You know, more people. I could probably even play this. This might pass the Tom's Mom challenge or whatever. So this is probably one of the Stefan Felds that I'd recommend more, other than his other ones. But anywho, I feel like I'm talking way too much, and I'm just done with this anyways. Link in the description box down below. Game Toppers link, also, that's done there. And whatever, subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored. Boom.